Okay, so let's get started with 2025 non negotiables. This is going to be a bit of an ongoing list because I'm constantly adding things to it. But here's what we're not doing anymore 2025 going forward. Number one, no response is a response. Now, this is a bit of, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive. And not that the devil needs an advocate, but here's the thing unless it's business, extremely time sensitive or an emergency, there's no excuse for that, right? Then yes, hey, let's get with it, let's get to it. But if it's just a casual conversation, when someone takes eons to reply back, especially when it's someone new who you may not know their communication style, it can be a little bit frustrating. But when it is someone that you do know, it is worth bringing up if it's important enough to you to correct that very early on in your relationship of your dynamic with people. Be it romantic, familial, platonic, professional. I think I said familial already. We have standards for our relationships. And here, let me just say this, and I will say this again throughout all the non negotiables. If the same is true of them for how they show up, then it's also true of us. So let's not get on our high horse about, no, it goes both ways. So let's make sure that when we open our mouths, when we show up, that we're also holding ourselves to that same standard. Because some people can't take a hint, and so they'll persist and they'll persist and they'll persist. When someone is who has poor communication styles, is giving minimal effort, is giving low effort engagement, remove yourself. Just remove yourself from that setting, because one of two things is going to happen. Either you were never meant to be in that sort of dynamic with them to begin with, or they're gonna come correct and fix their mistake and realize, like, wow, your presence out of my life is gravely um important to me, and I want to fix that behavior. Because at the end of the day, we're always talking about the behavior. And if I can add on to that, no response is a response. Anytime when we're talking about the behavior and not the person, because it is so easy for us to, in the heat of the moment, right, to talk about the person, to point fingers, and to really get in that accusatory state. If the goal is to overcome, if the goal is to find a solution, if the goal is to find the path forward, let's address the problem. The problem's not necessarily them, but the problem is the issue. Let's attack the problem. And if the relationship is worth saving, let's do our due diligence. My mom says it to me all the time. A relationship of any sort should require effort, but it shouldn't be laborious. If it's becoming laborious, taxing, draining, that's when you need to be done, and that's when you need to walk away, because nothing is worth that amount of peace. You get me? And again, not that the devil needs a representative, but people make time for what they want. And just because it's a priority for you doesn't necessarily mean that it's a priority for them. I'm going to say that again. Just because it's a priority for you does not necessarily mean it's a priority for them. And a lot of issues can be resolved if we just would simply talk to each other. Hey, I felt in this way in which you did X, Y, and Z. I felt slighted. I felt ignored. Before I jumped to that conclusion, what was going on in your life? And sometimes you might find that, oh, hey, it was a family emergency. That's why they haven't been talking to you for a couple of days. Okay, great. So let's take a step back and see the objective in the dynamic before we jump to the subjective. Now, let me just say this, because we be telling on ourselves. I texted you at 8 o'clock this morning. You had a full day. A full day. You were on the gram, saw you were on the TikTok, and this is also the other thing that I really don't like about social media, is that because we get into this investigatory state of headhunting,